Welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, and this is your Cannabis Business Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about a cannabis bubble. Is there a cannabis pot stock bubble? On the line with us is Dan Kimmis, our CBD correspondent with Good CBD Products. So with today's news out of Yahoo Finance, it looks like LeafWire closed a $1 million funding round. So LeafWire is a cannabis business network, and they closed its seed funding round of $1 million. They have over 1,000 members visiting their platform and projected to surpass 25,000 members by the end of the year. It's an interesting number, nice round 7-figure digit for a global cannabis business network, kind of like a cannabis business podcast. We might also be looking for 7 digits down the road. Knowing that cash is king, from another article from Yahoo Finance, a lot of companies obviously finding it difficult to raise capital. We don't have banking options. In the US, you can't really file an IPO yet. You have to go through Canada right now because it's Schedule 1. So stifling growth, stifling innovation, knowing that cash is king. So when you look at the valuation from CanTrust, that dropped 74% from their market high, that might be a buyout opportunity for institutional investors if they've got enough cash, as well as the mom and pop investors that want to buy the dip, which I don't recommend. The Talking Hedge does not recommend that as well. But cash is king is in this new wave of consolidation and opportunities with the value on the U.S. As we look at the market in Canada being a little bit overinflated as this next article goes into the bubble. And so we're kind of maybe already seeing that. Flower had to withdraw a $95 million offering because they announced a smaller capital raise. That's on the back of High Times dropping their $50 million IPO for a reverse transaction, essentially buying a shell company and then just changing the name. Whereas Flower said that they had to take a $43 million buyout from the underwriter. So I haven't heard of that happening in the cannabis industry. It doesn't happen very often, but at the same time, it's also not rare for the underwriter to buy the securities pre-IPO. Generally, it's considered part of their commission. And so when having to ask them to take more, that's not necessarily a good thing.
So I'm Chronic's CBD correspondent, or the Talking Hedge's CBD correspondent. I spend a lot of time on the ground, right? And the number of organizations that I deal with that are suddenly feeling the pressure to show revenue, right? They've been laughing and yucking and having a great time. And now all of a sudden, the people who are minding the store want to know, hey, those projections, right? How are we doing on those projections? And for so many, it's like the forgotten task on the list. Make some money. Come on, make some money.
Right, and a lot of people have been looking for that next Microsoft or Apple stock, and so just dumping into individual securities or even the portfolios overall. We've seen that the cannabis stocks have been going absolutely gangbusters over the last couple of years, and yet recently, the major Canadian cannabis cultivators have lost, on average, almost 30% of their value, and so maybe that bubble is popping. So they're kind of taking this article from, again, Yahoo Finance is taking a look at the classic stock market bubble, which goes in to say that as a whole, it's exhibiting the classic hallmarks of a bubble and asking, what defines that bubble. They say that it's the market analysts and academics that broadly define bubbles as a rapid inflation and subsequent deflation in the price of a set, closely related to stocks in relation to the new innovation or emerging market. Breaking that down, it just means that the speculation went up, it's crashing, coming back down. So it reached unrealistic heights. So the next wave is going to be shifting into more value stocks and companies, which is going to be in the US, and probably hemp, CBD, or CBG, depending on how the FDA cracks down. They've already showed their cards and said that you can't make claims. So with that, it's going to be up to education. So I think there's going to be a lot of drive in the tech sector for education as a way to market claims. So two key takeaways from investing lessons. The first key takeaway investors want is to keep firmly in mind that the easy money has been made at this point. This brings us to the second key investment takeaway, that the best pot stocks to buy in this post-bubble environment are going to be companies like Canopy, Kronos, perhaps CanTrust as a buyout candidate. I don't think that in the eventuality that the U.S. goes legal, that any of those companies are going to exist as they are now, because they all expect to sell wholesale pre-rolls or even grams of flower at $1.70 or more, when in reality, that's probably going to be down to 7 or 8 cents.
I was just going to say, I spent the better share of 12 hours on the phone yesterday, talking to different people involved in mergers and acquisitions, basically offers, right? Selling their businesses or purchasing businesses and such. And the common theme is, hey, is this data accurate? Is this company real? How do we know these people are actually performing? And again, the bulk of the people in the cannabis industry, a lot of people have oversold their business, right? They've overhyped things. And there's a reckoning coming.
Canopy's CEO was recently let go. He was an amazing deal maker, but couldn't really generate revenue. And so although the PR was amazing, their shareholders demanded that he be held accountable. He had a fiduciary duty to draw as much capital in, investment, and new shareholders, and wasn't able to convert that PR into investment capital. And that's why he got fired, as well as CanTrust Holding, whose CEO apparently knew about growing in 5 unlicensed rooms and didn't do anything about it. And so he got fired. Who knows what Health Canada is going to do to them? They might end up the same way as Agrima Botanical, also known as Ascent Industries in Vancouver, who lost their license for very similar things.
If you have big plans in this industry, cutting corners or taking a shortcut, all it's going to do for you later when you go to execute your big plan, at a minimum, you're going to have a mess that needs to be cleaned up, and it may well take you down.
To play devil's advocate, there's another article talking about why the pot stock bubble hasn't really burst yet. And so they say that it's been worse, which is a terrible argument. It really seems like the thought process of buying a stock is more about FOMO and less about technical indicators and fundamental indicators that are necessary to make that right investment choice. And now it's just about dumping it in because they're fearful of not making a profit. It's not the way it's supposed to go. What I'm not seeing is that there's an opportunity with beverages and concentrates in October when that market gets initialized and stores get their product. There'll be a lot more sales, a lot more revenue. Hopefully that will save some of those companies who have had decreasing revenue as they just keep acquiring new companies and expanding without increasing their market cap or revenue, rather. Whereas on the flip side, we've seen companies with $80 million market caps and their revenue is $80,000. And so that's a pet.com 1990s textbook example of a company that was worth a lot of money and had absolutely no sales. And when the market dropped, all those shareholders lost money.
Petfood.com, brother. I was there. I was on the front line of that one, right? I literally pulled my bread out of the market right before that day when it all burst. And this is the thing. Again, when you look at this one, bubbles, how many bubbles are we going to see as this travels along, right? Part of the reason you listen to the Talking Hedge, your cannabis industry podcast, is because we keep our finger on the pulse there.
The Talking Hedge, it's got a couple of meanings. We're about the plant as a hedge, and also to hedge your bets. And so, in the eventuality that there is a correction, which is coming, it's the slowest financial train wreck in history. And yet, what we've already seen in the past is that pot stocks can actually go up. There's an inverse relationship. When the market goes down, sin stocks will go up. So whether it's a defensive stock like Lockheed Martin or big tobacco, alcohol, cannabis, those sin stocks will actually go up, and people will take their money out of a depreciating investment vehicle like a real estate investment trust or the Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, the FANG index, if you will. and they'll put their money into more speculative stocks, hoping to, retire, like what we're seeing in the pension funds that are forced into fixed income. Other people would just invest strictly out of speculation.
Let's face it. One of the things that's interesting is that term, the thin stock. I don't really think cannabis necessarily needs to be lumped in there from just a language perspective. But at the same time, ultimately, I think what you're saying is that these things that people use to essentially feel a little bit better, whether that's having a beer in the afternoon or enjoying your indica there before bed, those kinds of things, when things get rough, yeah, no doubt, that's where people turn.
Right. And to clarify on the definition and maybe the background of sin stocks, there's a clause that a lot of pensions and institutional investors have where they can't invest in any impairment. So even big pharma or alcohol, things of that nature, they're not allowed to invest in. And so those are typically called sin stocks, preventing certain investment groups from investing. And so, it's a term. But I guess the point being that if you do want to hedge your bet, cannabis is probably a good spot to get in right now as we're looking at a correction, probably early 2020. And with that, we're going to roll this one up. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is the Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't. And I'm out.